That is how countries rank when it comes to high school science test scores. U.S. students, as you saw, rank 15th in the world, and that list you saw doesn't include China. There are no comprehensive results for that country, just regions. However, Shanghai's test scores were the best in the entire world. On that note, we are discussing the future of energy science with White House Science and Tech Advisor John Holdren, Ralph Cicerone, the head of the National Academy of Sciences, and Assistant Energy Secretary David Sandalow. Gentlemen, an open-ended question. How big is this gap between us and the rest of the world regarding math and science and the scientists and engineers of the future?
Let me address the gap. David and John might want to talk more about what we're doing about it, but the gap is real and it's big. There are a lot of different tests, and of course you can always complain that the tests are a little bit different from each other, and you get slightly different results. But this latest round was done by people who are as good as anybody else at getting representative groups of children, in this case I think it was 15-year-olds from different countries, and giving them the same tests, and we did not do well. I think we were 15th in science, but I think we were like 30th or something in mathematics and 17th in reading around the nation. This is not good. Why? Because we have these specific challenges where we need highly talented and well-educated people, such as in energy research and development, but also, frankly, to run a democracy, you have to have a well-educated population, not just the elite, but as many people as possible, and we're not doing well.
Is the fault lying with the education system or the curiosity of our kids?
I think it's far more the education system. Kids, all of the tests show, kids start out extremely curious. And in fact, in a variety of ways, the education system ends up stifling that curiosity. And kids get less interested and less capable in math and science as their education goes on, until the university level, when kids who are interested in science and technology end up starting to make up for the deficiencies of K through 12 education in that domain.
The hyper-focus begins.
We got terrific universities in science and engineering, but there's a lot we can do to improve science and math education at the K through 12 level, and that's a very high priority for the Obama administration. The president himself puts high priority on it. Secretary Duncan, Secretary of Energy, has high priority on it, and I think we've probably launched more initiatives in that domain in the last 2 years than probably had been launched in the previous couple of decades.
When you speak of the president's priorities, David, I want to turn to you because one of those is addressing climate change. Yet there's another science gap here between the scientific community, which is almost unanimous regarding climate change that's happening, the effect of humans on that, and the perception of American voters or Americans on the whole, or the new members of Congress who are coming in, that there are an inordinate number of climate skeptics who will now be on Capitol Hill beginning this year. Is that a gap worth addressing from the White House as a priority?
There is a gap, Tyler, and I think there are a lot of skeptics in the country. I think skepticism about science puts the United States at a competitive disadvantage. Other countries are marching forward in the 21st century to deploy new technologies. That creates wealth. However, I think that gap can often be overstated, and often is overstated. And particularly with respect to the climate change issue, I would highlight this. Last year, a majority of Americans supported action on climate change. The polling data was very clear on that. A majority of the House of Representatives supported action on climate change. They passed a bill. I believe a majority of the Senate supported action on climate change if you took what we call here in Washington, D.C. a whip count and counted the senators. But they weren't able to get to 60 votes, which is the requirement in the U.S. Senate. Now, I think that there is a lot of support for action on climate change in this country, and we have to find ways to make that happen within our political system. And we have to make sure that Americans are educated and trained in a way to help our country succeed in the 21st century, not just with respect to this issue narrowly, but more broadly on science and technology.
Well, regarding the numbers, you can debate who thinks what, but there are members of that climate skeptic minority that are in strong positions of power. Jim Inhofe, the leading minority member on the Senate Environment Committee, is one who counts himself as a climate skeptic. This year coming in, John, the chairman of the House Science and Technology Committee, right up your alley, Ralph Hall, a Republican from Texas, may be considered a climate skeptic. Do you have to fight the climate change battle all over again in order to get through these lawmakers and get the funding you need?
Well, certainly the process of educating folks about what we know about climate science, what we know about the options for dealing with climate change. That's a continuing process. You're never done with the educational dimension. I think in the new Congress there will unquestionably be hearings on climate science. I think those hearings are going to end up being educational. I think we'll probably move the opinions of some of the members of Congress who currently call themselves skeptics, because I think a lot of good scientists are going to come in and explain very clearly what we know and how we know it, and what it means, and it's a very persuasive case.
How big, Ralph, is that climate skeptic group among the American people? I know that you read the studies and the polling that's out there. Is it overrepresented or underrepresented in your opinion?
I think the answers really depend on the questions that are asked too much. I'm having trouble sorting through exactly what the public attitude is. We have so many different segments of the public. I think the science is becoming much, much clearer, though, especially when you can look at the Earth from space, which is where actually many of the data are coming from, on temperatures and sea level, and the loss of ice amounts over Greenland and Antarctica, the changing precipitation patterns, the evidence becoming very clear that something large scale is happening, and that a good part of it is due to human influence. I think what people want out in the public is more information about their particular city. Can I predict the weather ahead 10 years in my city for a particular week of the year? I don't think we can do that. So we have to bridge this gap between the public, what the public expects to know, and what they value, and what we're capable of delivering. So somewhere in between convincing people that things are really happening right now and filling their needs is where we are.
I mentioned the need for funding that has to go through Congress. Let's talk about ARPA-E, for example, which we discussed earlier, this home run science R&D. $400 million through the Recovery Act was put toward ARPA-E. That's beginning to run out. The White House wants $300 million for next year. However, your alma mater, John, and your alma mater, Ralph, MIT, through a publication there said, and I'm quoting, funding for energy R&D should be stagnant next year, meaning 2011, and decrease in 2012. Is that just the temperature of Congress, or is that a growing trend, a continuing battle for research money that you need?
There are always battles about resources and how to allocate the available resources in the federal budget. But we have some pretty good indications from President Obama that he will remain committed to doing everything we can to bolster investments in science and technology and science and math teaching in general, and to put the investments into energy research and development that we need. He spoke repeatedly since the financial constraints that affect the government's budget have materialized. He's still spoken repeatedly about the importance of making these investments in the future through investing in science and technology and in science and technology and math education.
Briefly, David, the money will be there?
I hope so, Tyler. I mean, the ARPA-E program, which you asked about in particular, has had broad bipartisan support. We certainly hope it will continue. There are legislators on both sides of the aisle with a lot of experience in the education. I think immediately of Senator Lamar Alexander was a university president, and a number of legislators who have really been strong about investing in science and technology, making sure that America has the competitive edge in the years ahead based on those investments. I would really emphasize that point. In the 21st century, the race is not just about financial capital. It's not about natural resources. It's about human capital. Unless we're investing in young Americans, we're not going to be succeeding in the 21st century.
Okay, let's stop it right there just for now. And when we come back and continue our discussion about the future of energy science, a closer look at energy policy in the year ahead, a change in Congress and a change in attitude perhaps as well, plus what may be our biggest competition and source of cooperation internationally, the country of China. All of that is coming up when Energy Now continues.